Hello, friends, and welcome to the Imago Nutrition Podcast, where we answer your questions and give you practical nutrition strategies to help you and your family flourish. Danielle, I am going to jump right into it. We are not wasting any time because if you as the listener have been anywhere near social media, the news, or another living, breathing human being the last couple days, you have likely heard that the new 2030, 25 to 2030 dietary guidelines for Americans, and perhaps even more popular, the new food pyramid has been released. And so we love that people are talking about nutrition, right? We love that out of nowhere, the government did something in this realm and it's blowing up on social media. Danielle, is that always the case? Does this happen every 5 years that they release new guidance and everyone starts debating and talking about it online?
No, but my coworker said it was like the Super Bowl for dietitians, when it happened last time, and no one was talking about it.
No one was happy. It's so
just
true.
Us nerds.
And so on that point, this is something that happens every 5 years, right? And so since 1980, we have done this, okay? And there's kind of two main public-facing vehicles that people are interacting with. One is, I think, dominating the conversation right now, and that is the visual component of that. It's the new food pyramid. So people are either up in arms or super excited about, there's a new food pyramid. It's this whole play. It's upside down. The Trump administration and RFK, they are inverting the past. They're doing everything differently than what's gotten us to all our health problems currently. So we understand that. We get that. But then there's also the written guidelines. Okay. Those are at the very least, those are the two public facing. Okay. And so obviously these are intended to be, food-based recommendations that help us as Americans, specific to Americans, promote health, prevent, diet-related chronic disease, meet nutrient needs, ... Okay. And so what Danielle and I are going to attempt to do, let me start with what we're not going to do. We are not going to do a massive, massive deep dive into all the nuance. There's not a chance we could do that. We both have families. We record these on a weekend. We would not be able to see our families the rest of the night if we did that, because it would take hours and hours and hours to unpack all the angles and nuance. So what we're going to attempt to do is give you a firm grasp of what this means. And we're going to give you some honest thoughts about the new guidance relative to prior guidance, perhaps, but also relative just to what we know to be true as evidence-based nutrition practitioners, right? And constantly immersing ourselves in the ever changing, but not always changing evidence on such topics, okay? So if I could, maybe I'll give us a quick little roadmap. So that's just a bit of a setup, okay? We're going to talk real quick just about the food pyramid as a representation, I would say, of the guidelines. I'll talk a little bit about that history real quick. It's not going to get boring. Okay. We'll talk about the most recent visual, which was something called My Plate, which I don't want to give away the end, but I think a lot of people didn't know existed. Okay. To the point earlier, everyone's like, oh my gosh, the new food pyramid. No one did that when we launched My Plate. Okay. Then we're going to kind of actually walk through the new guidelines because they're actually relatively short. They're very short relative to previous edition. That we'll talk about whether that's a pro or a con. So we're going to actually walk through that. Danielle and I will kind of dice that up and kind of go back and forth on that, but we're going to walk you through it quickly. And we'll kind of talk about some differences from previous and some kind of pros and cons along the way. Okay. But let me start by saying this, and Danielle, we had the audacity. I'm like sitting up in my chair for those of you who are just listening. Sorry, like my body. You can tell we are like on our toes on this one. Like we just jumped on a call ahead of time. We haven't even compared notes. We had the audacity to basically look into this stuff, formulate our thoughts ahead of time, and we haven't even compared notes. Okay. And so we jumped on this and we're talking through just a few things. Where are we going with this? And maybe for the first time, Danielle, you like cut me off. You're like, hit record, let's go. It was like, okay. So we're excited to get into this, want to keep it engaging, but we also want to keep it moving because there's no way we could possibly do a deep dive into all the nuance and considerations. But I do want to start by saying, look, here's the deal with the new one. Okay. In terms of the food pyramid and the new written guidelines, both of those things together, it's only 10 pages long. Okay. You can go search dietary guidelines for Americans. It's realfood.gov, I think. Click on it. Yeah, it says it right there, realfood.gov. You can download this as a PDF. You can print it out. It is only 10 pages. Danielle, the last one was 164 pages. Okay. I remember the last time I read it top to bottom was in 2021. So I think I read it pretty much top to bottom when it first came out in 2020. But then in 2021, that's when I did my Stanford course. And so that's when I went back through it top to bottom. Look, I love this stuff, and it's hard to get through 164 pages. You find yourself skimming, like, okay. So, but all that's to say, this one is only 10 pages long, and that is with the first page is just a picture. Okay. So there's 9 pages of text, and not all the pages are even full pages. Every single American can actually go and have zero excuse to not read it. Now, we'll talk a little bit about what's contained within it, but we want to start by saying, your best bet is to read it for yourself so that you can begin to understand the conversation swirling around it. What is true? What is hyperbolic? What might be a little disconnected? What might seem totally normal and fine? And why are people worried about it? So we did want to start. That was one thing we did say before we hit record is like, we got to make sure that we encourage you to go read it. It's only 10 pages. Okay. So again, RFK Jr., health secretary, comes out. This has been coming. We knew it was going to happen with the whole MAHA movement, Make America Healthy Again, right? And the new dietary guidelines for Americans dropped last week. Okay, so here's just a quick backdrop. What a lot of people don't know is that the food pyramid was first introduced, actually, I think globally back in the 60s. But in America, the first instance of the food pyramid was created in 1992. Okay, and that's the one that most people are visually remembering. And as I've surveyed online, I'm in social media a lot. What most people are comparing the new one to is the 1992 version. That's the one that's got essentially 6 kind of horizontal sections or echelons that work their way up this pyramid with the apex at the top. Okay. The base of it, if you may remember, is bread, cereal, rice, pasta. The next echelon was both the fruits and the vegetables. The next echelon was dairy and meat, poultry, fish, beans, eggs, nuts. And then the apex was fats, oils, and sweets, noted to be used sparingly. Okay. Then what a lot of people don't know is that changed to my pyramid in 2005. This is, I think, the silliest one of all. I'll try to explain it. You can just Google it. Just Google my pyramid and you'll get a graphical representation of it. Essentially, it had some of the same food categories across the bottom of the pyramid. It was grains, vegetables, fruit, dairy, meat, and beans across the bottom, just in all on the same kind of line. And then they all had these cones that ran up the pyramid to the apex. Super weird. And even weirder than that, there was a figure to the left of it that was like walking up stairs of the pyramid. Okay. Can't go much more into that. We don't have time. Super weird, super like obsolete, just didn't make sense. However, we went from food pyramid to my pyramid. And then in 2011, we discontinued the food pyramid. Okay, hear me. We discontinued the food pyramid and we changed to my plate. That was 2011. Okay, so the first sort of like mini jab I want to throw out there is that for everyone out there being like, we finally updated the food pyramid, it's not accurate. What we did is we apparently resurrected a discontinued food pyramid, changed it, and are now saying we've updated it, but we've jumped over my plate. So let's talk a little bit about my plate. Danielle, talk to us a little bit about kind of what that visual representation, again, that was not the written guidelines, but that was the visual component that replaced the pyramid or the my pyramid and came before this new food pyramid. Talk to us a little bit about what my plate meant.
Yeah, my plate was really just a practical tool for how to use the dietary guidelines. It had, you think of a plate as a circle. It had half the plate as produce, so a portion of it was fruit, and then the other portion was vegetables, with the vegetable portion just slightly bigger.
Yep.
Then the other half was divided into protein and carbs pretty equally. So I think what was helpful about that is just like the idea of building your meal. I should say the dairy was a little cup to the side.
On the side, yep.
What was helpful, I think, was just visualizing the need for your food groups for each meal. And it emphasized half plate produce. which I still highly encourage everyone to do.
Absolutely.
I think the disadvantage of it is, like Mark mentioned, a lot of people didn't know it existed or used the tool. There was also like nice like calculator on myplate.gov, but also it just didn't give specifics in the visual. It didn't give specifics in the food categories of which ones to choose, right? So it just said protein, just said carbs. It doesn't say how to choose the fruit. So maybe someone would choose juice or something. So yes, I think it had, as always, everything has pluses and minuses. So
Totally.
that's what the My Plate is.
So that's what came again after the pyramid, before the new one. All right. So what we want to do is kind of talk about the evolution of the guidelines and perhaps the visual as well. But keep in mind that our reference point is My Plate now. Okay. Not sixth grade. Okay. I'm going to be 45 this year, right? It's not like, oh my goodness, can you believe they're still teaching? They're not still teaching the old pyramid. Okay. So perhaps one of my honest frustrations is that virtually every single person that I've talked to that is celebrating, I'm not saying that it's wrong. We're going to talk about that. Every person that like, this is a massive win online. And I've talked with a lot of people online since this dropped. Not a single one was comparing it to My Plate. What they were comparing it to was a discontinued version of the pyramid. All right. So let's just be honest about that. And it's okay. And if that was you and you've course corrected, we forgive you. It's okay. It's all right to not know that stuff. We're nerds. We stay in this stuff. So what we're going to do is talk about this is the next chapter. Okay. My Plate was the prior chapter. This is the next chapter of dietary guidelines for Americans, both in written and visual form. All right. So if you're watching this, you can see I've been holding up the document a little bit. We have the document here. All right. So I'm just going to kind of walk us through a little bit of this. Danielle and I are going to walk us through each of the sections, because again, it's only 10 pages. So first page, you're just going to see the inverted pyramid. Okay. You've basically got dietary guidelines for Americans. You've got this inverted pyramid. So the apex is actually at the bottom. You've got protein, dairy, and healthy fats in the upper left. You've got fruits and vegetables in the upper right. You have whole grains at the very bottom, at the bottom apex, which is weird to say, but it's an inverted pyramid. And then you've got kind of a mix in the middle. We're not going to go through all of those, but that's what it looks like. That's page one. Page two is a message from the secretaries. They do this in all the guidelines, is actually just kind of write out their hope as you get ready to digest the information. And so you've got it there from, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Brooke Rowlands. You've got the message from the secretaries. You can read that. It's a one page. You can read it real quick.
I was just going to say one thing about that.
Yep.
I liked the simple and the sense of urgency in that letter. I liked how it said "eat real food." Stated pretty simply and bolded.
Right at the
top. What I don't like is it makes it all sound so easy for everybody, and that that hurts me a little bit because it's not as easy as that.
Yeah, totally. Agree. It says at the top, I won't read the whole thing. These guidelines mark the most significant reset in federal nutrition policy in our nation's history. I don't know if I agree with that. As we're going to talk, I don't think this is radically different, to be honest. There's some weird things, I think, and there's some great things. We'll talk about those in a balanced way. But this is classic. And I say this with zero partisan impetus. This is just part of the administration. Everything is the greatest it's ever been done ever for all of human history, right? So this is just a manifestation. This is the Maha version of the Trump administration saying everything we're doing is better, right? So take that or leave that, hate it, love it, whatever you want, somewhere in the middle. It's fine. It's just what it says at the top. And then to Danielle's point, it says the message is simple: eat real food. Okay. Now, for decades and decades and decades and decades, we've been saying more nutrient-dense whole foods, less processed foods. Okay. My biggest beef is then it says to make America healthy again, we must return to the basics. American households must prioritize diets built on whole nutrient-dense foods, protein, dairy, vegetables, fruits, healthy fats, comma, and then it starts a new line. So format. I think I told you before I wasn't going to say this, but I was it's like someone hit the return button on the second sent line and it created a whole new line. I'm like, okay, guys. Execution already.
Loved that class in college. You're so good at picking up on those things.
You're the government, but I also don't have very high expectations for the government. Okay. So when the government in the second line creates another paragraph or another break in the middle of a sentence, I think it's hilarious. But it does seem to be a fairly potent, fairly powerful kind of right out the gate. Here's the message. Let's eat real food. Let's get into it. So if that's quote page 2, page 3, really just kind of broken into 3 sections. So I'll just kind of give us a general overview of this, Danielle. And then, of course, curious your thoughts. And I know you'll guide us toward kind of the back half of this. So right at the top, it starts with eat the right amount for you. And really what that boils down to for me is my near and dear topic of energy balance, right? Like we know that about 74% of Americans are overweight or obese. That is the single greatest threat to the health that we as a population, along with heart disease, which by the way is highly, highly correlated with being overweight and obese. And so eat the right amount for you is energy balance. Calories you need depend on individual characteristics. Pay attention to portion sizes. Hydration is key. So again, the first section, eat the right amount for you. I think it's a double thumbs up. Definitely everyone needs to reconcile. Now, it doesn't give much nuance, but I'm curious your thoughts on how quickly they summarize. Oh yeah, by the way, just eat the right amount for you.
Yeah, so the last guidelines went a lot more calorie focused. And so, some people do thrive in that environment looking at calories. But I think using intuitive eating is a very helpful tool, and it doesn't mention either one of those. So
True.
I think they could have possibly included that, like, here's how you determine what's the right amount for you. Intuitive eating, learn your calories. That could have been a simple sentence possibly. But.
Yeah, because they'll say things like pay attention to portion sizes, particularly for foods or beverages high in calories. So what does that mean? Like what? And yeah. So yes, it is individual. And by the way, let me almost risk giving away the end. The end is that this is very broad. If you're going to do what used to be take almost 170 pages in 10 pages, it's going to be broad, and therefore. You very likely are going to need continued, nutritional guidance from a professional. Okay. So that's what we love doing, but just know that a lot of this is very general. And so if you're sort of like, but what does that mean? That's what folks like us are here to help you with. Okay. So eat the right amount for you. Then it goes into prioritize protein foods at every meal. Okay.
I just love how it says every meal.
Every meal. You do. It's great, right? Prioritize protein foods at every meal. It says high quality, nutrient dense proteins are part of a healthy dietary pattern. It says this, the second bullet is consume a variety of proteins from animal sources, including eggs, poultry, seafood, red meat, as well as a variety of plant sourced protein foods, including beans, peas, lentils, legumes, nuts, seeds, and soy. We love that, don't we? Mm-hmm. But the graphic on the front doesn't really show that. Okay. So the first kind of big disconnect, I think, in this is like, ooh, pretty picture. Got it. There's all the proteins that I want. Now, do I think that they had to put every food on this? No, that's why I think the pyramid is a little weird to begin with as a visual, but it's clear that they preferenced animal protein on the graphic and not the plant. And so to your point, Danielle, I'm curious more thoughts you have. They say every meal, they say animal and plant, but visually, which is what most people are talking about, apart from our listeners who are definitely going to go read these 10 pages, right? Most people are now looking at that pyramid being like, there it is. It's the red meats. It's the eggs. It's the salmon. It's the cheese. It's the, chicken. It's the whole milk. It's the eggs, and they're not processing what a plant protein visually looks like. But your thoughts?
I mean, I don't even know how to say anything, but it just there is for most people, there's fewer plant-based sources than animal-based sources, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I guess to give them any grace, it would be that like, well, we put all the plant ones. I don't have the image right in front of me, but maybe all the plant ones are on there. They're just really small, and the animal ones are really easy to see.
Yeah.
Because I do think there was like nuts and seeds on it.
There's a little bit of nuts, a little bit of seeds. There's green beans.
Okay,
that's
green
about
beans
it.
aren't a good source of protein, but
that's about it.
There's no beans
because they mention lentils, legumes. I think technically green beans are a legume, right? Because they're in a pod, but not a great source of protein, not like peas. And so
they could have just put like a big pile of beans somewhere. That would have been helpful.
Yep. Yeah, I hear you. Just the nuts are real small grown. So, but I'll say this too. So I'm a little more critical on that. I love that you're trying to be, more graceful. We'll kind of teeter totter back and forth, but I do love this. It says protein serving goals, 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. I love this. I'll tell you why. I don't believe the last one. And I went and scoured it again today. The 164 pages. I did my search function. I was trying to confirm. I don't believe they gave a gram recommendation in the 2020 version. And what is commonly referred to throughout literature and guidance is the what's known as the RDA, the recommended dietary allowance, right, of protein, which is 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Here's the thing. That was never intended to be the goal. That was intended to be the minimum to avoid what's known as a negative nitrogen balance, where your body starts breaking itself down because it doesn't have enough nitrogen. Okay, so for my vegan friends, I'll push on you because that's a number that you've been citing a lot as well, right? I've got vegan friends that I hook and jab on with this stuff all the time. Love our vegan friends, but they're constantly, Americans eat way too much protein. It's just 0.8. We just go way above. 0.8 was not the goal. 0.8 was the floor. It was the foundation. It was like, don't go below this so that your body doesn't start breaking itself down. And you can go back through our podcast history. You know that I have consistently recommended and said that if someone put a gun to my head and I had no clue them, their goal, what they looked like, age, gender, sex, whatever that is, and they said, how much protein should I eat? But I'm not going to give you any more information. I would say, probably 1.6 grams, right? Like that's right in the middle of all the research that I've seen. It goes all the way up to like 2.2. So that 1.2 to 2.2 is really kind of the wide range depending on your goal, right? If you're a bodybuilder, it's 360 pounds, right? You've got different considerations than me, who's 180, 5'11, lifting weights and playing soccer, different from an endurance runner, different from, dot, dot, dot. So I love 1.6 to 1 or 1.2 to 1.6 grams being stated in the guidelines. Curious your thoughts on that, Danielle.
Yeah, I think it's a helpful reference. I mean, like you said, there wasn't that really bolded in the other one. So for people to know how much protein, I think I'm constantly trying to get people to think about how to incorporate whole food protein, not just turning to supplements. So,
Totally. Yeah. All right, so we've got eat the right amount for you, prioritize protein foods at every meal. And then the third one is interesting and a little curious, consume dairy. Okay, so we're gonna wade into the topic. We'll get back to it here in a second. So it says when consuming dairy, include full-fat dairy with no added sugars. Dairy is an excellent source of protein, healthy fats, vitamins, and minerals. And that's the first reference, I think, of healthy fats. Okay, we'll talk about that a little bit more. But it's interesting that there's now an emphasis, and if you know anything about RFK and the Maha folks, it's this full fat revolution, right? We've been talking about this for well over a year now since RFK was even possibly going to come on board, and since he has, certainly it's increased. And so here's interesting. Dairy serving goals is 3 servings per day as a part of 2,000 calorie dietary pattern. And so we're going to get into this a little bit more because there's a whole section on healthy fats, but we love dairy. We love dairy. So my bend on this, Danielle, curious your thoughts, is that low fat and skim dairy options have just as much nutrient value with a lot less calories. And we are a nation that is 74% overweight and obese. And I don't know if suddenly pushing additional calories for no additional nutrient value is necessarily wise in this section. Curious your thoughts.
Absolutely. But also the fact that there's saturated fat in there, which we'll talk about in a minute.
We are, because now what you're starting to see is like, hey, do full fat dairy. It's a good source of healthy fats. We have to define what healthy fats is. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay. So that is essentially page 3. It's got a little note there about gut health as well, which is kind of like a separate call out. So you can read through that when you go through the 10 pages, because every single person listening to this is going to go read all 10 pages. So the next page at the top says eat vegetables and fruits throughout the day. We love this, right? We're obsessed with this. Like we white girl obsess over this stuff. Like we this is everything. This is all the things. To their credit, fruits and vegetables are the top right of this inverted pyramid. Okay. And so, yeah, exactly. Amen. Right. In the last rubric, it was half your plate. So there was an obvious visual importance there. But talks about a litany of things in terms of, colorful, nutrient dense. By the way, I do love that nutrient dense is kind of littered throughout here. That's anyone that's been listening to us knows that's our common vernacular too. That's what we like to say. We don't even like to call foods bad or good. We like to call them on a scale of nutrient dense to nutrient deficient, right? That sort of stuff. Whole veggies, frozen, dried, canned, the good options, flavor with salt and spices if you want, herbs. But the nuts and the bolts of this is vegetables. You want to focus on 3 servings per day, fruits, 2 servings per day. Thoughts on that, Danielle?
I love that whole section, honestly. The throughout the day, I love that. Right,
Yeah.
include them as snacks and have them for breakfast. And I love the word variety. Yeah, there's a lot of good in that section.
Beautiful. 5 a day, right? So every day we're getting 3 servings of veggies, 2 servings of fruits. I'll admit, because I'm not afraid to break, illusions of perfection. I usually do like 3 or 4 of fruit a day and then try to get like 1 or 2 of veggies. I'm not going to lie. Like I will sit there with hummus and carrots at times and green peppers. And Carissa, my wife, does a great job incorporating. But like throughout the day, I'm much more leaning toward fruits, right?
Mm-hmm.
So again, don't want to give away any allure. Like that's my preference. I love fruits, right?
Yeah.
And so that's an area that I've got to be stretched on, but I'm still looking to get 5 servings between the 2 over the course of a day.
Yeah. I think it's good that they said, include spices and herbs. So, like, try to get them to taste good is hopefully what they're hinting at.
Totally.
Because you have to grow your taste buds. I think there was one more point that you just mentioned, but go on. I'm sure it will come back to me.
No worries. Pop in at any time. So we love to eat vegetables and fruits throughout the day. Very clear, very bold. Now it gets a little interesting. The next section on this page is incorporate healthy fats. Okay. So again, you're under this banner of healthy fats. Healthy fats are plentiful in many, I'm quoting directly, in whole foods such as meats, poultry, eggs, omega-3 rich seafood, nuts, seeds, full fat dairy. There it is again. So now we're saying healthy fats, full fat dairies, olives, avocados, etc. When cooking and adding fats to meals, this is interesting, prioritize oils with essential fatty acids such as olive oil. This was a sticking point for me. Olive oil, as amazing as it is not technically not a great source of essential fatty acids. Okay. So maybe that's a minor point, but again, we're talking about execution at a very high level in the most powerful government in the United States. I think someone could have maybe checked and just Googled real quick, is olive oil a good source of essential fatty acids? It is a good source of healthy fats, but not essential fatty acids. That's saying 2 different things. And what this is saying is essential fatty acids, and that's not technically the case. Okay. And then it says other options can include butter or beef tallow. What's your initial thoughts on that, Daniel?
Yikes. It's just a disconnect, as you're saying in the document that saturated fat should not exceed 10% total calories, which is exactly the same verbiage in the old document. And then you're
Correct.
saying that go ahead and have all these animal fats. Well, that's literally impossible to do both of those things.
Yep.
So it's kind of like, well, the research is showing that we still need to avoid saturated fat, but for some reason we want to encourage full fat. So we're just really makes no sense, honestly. That's all.
At this point, it's an ideology. It's an ideological difference. I'll contend with anyone that disagrees. This is not based on the research, or else they could have. Why didn't the saturated fat tolerance get cranked up to 20%? Right. All the people that are saying saturated fats, no problem, they're totally fine. The carnivore crowd, the low carb crowd, right? They're totally fine. Look at that. See, he said full fat dairy, totally fine. More red meat, totally fine. Then why didn't they increase from 10%? Right. I mean, practically, I'd love to see someone draw up the numbers on how you're gonna increase those foods, increase full fat dairy, increase your butter, start cooking with beef tallow, increase your red meat, and you're going to keep it below 10%. And then I don't even think you're realizing the disconnect in saying that you should be eating more saturated fat, but staying at the same threshold. So if they were to even be consistent with their recommendation, they should have just figured out a way to crank up that 10% to 20% or 30%, say, no, it's actually fine. But there's a massive disconnect in this section, which says, yeah, more of that, but keep it under 10%. Well, why do we need to keep it under 10% then? Right now, because the weight of the scientific evidence is that particularly saturated fat paired with dietary cholesterol increases LDL cholesterol, which is I believe the number one precursor for heart disease, which is the number one cause of premature death in America and around the world. Okay. So those 2 things combined. So we just have a mountain of evidence. And again, we're not saying no saturated fat. We're not saying no red meat. We're not saying no eggs. We're not saying no anything, but we are saying evidence suggests that keeping that sub 10% is optimal. But now there's this disconnect. It's like crank up the foods that include it, but don't turn up the tolerance or the threshold at all. So massive disconnect. Anything else on that, Danielle? We'll kind of come back to that in a second, but that's a big one.
No. I guess in that session, it does show that, there is just a reminder that fat is in your meat and poultry. I feel like people are thinking about constantly added fats in their diet, not necessarily just remembering that, like, chicken thighs, that has a lot of fat,
Yeah.
so choosing chicken breast is a lot better choice to have
Good
more
call.
often. So yeah, I think that was a good little reminder, whether they meant to do that or not.
Yeah. And like we say, with red meat, you're generally looking for cuts of red meat that have tip, top, loin, or round in the name, right? So try tip, sir, loin, eye of round. Like those are cuts of red meat. Why? Because they're leaner, which means they have less of the fat. What are the fat that we're trying to minimize? Saturated fat. Okay. We think that's a consistent approach. So interesting disconnect there. The next one on this page, which is page 4, is focus on whole grains. We love this. Okay. Prioritize fiber-rich whole grains. We love that. Significantly reduce consumption of highly processed. And then it says whole grain serving goals. It's a fun one for us. Ready? Okay. 2 to 4 servings per day. Okay. Now, you'll notice we're about to get into, a couple other pieces of this, but we've basically gone through the food pyramid and their written recommendations of the food pyramid, visually represented on the front of this document. You may remember, or if you've got the graphic in your mind, whole grains is the very teeny tiny bottom of that inverted apex, right at the bottom, just like there's like 3 oats right there at the bottom, right? Sort of like at the end of the day, if you're about to die from starvation, nibble on, I lied. There might be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There might be like 11 there with a little bowl or something like that. It's at the very bottom. They even draw a line. There's just a little bowl of oats and then like a loaf of bread. Tiny, tiny, tiny little thing. And guys, think about this.
A loaf of bread? Oh.
Just a loaf of bread. And guys, the written recommendation is that this is the highest volume of servings of all the other foods. Okay, so think about that. When people are like, this totally inverted the old food pyramid, which had grains at the bottom, but the written recommendation is actually that the base of the pyramid is still whole grains. Okay, now I know they've inverted it and visually made it look like the smallest, but the written recommendation does not match the graphic at all. Mm-hmm. It is actually by range that should be the largest in terms of servings. Thoughts on that, Danielle?
Well, now that you just pointed it out, I'm really sad that they didn't put any other examples of whole grains. They just used bread and oats. Yep. Like there's so many different options for whole grains. So
big miss. Big miss, because it's right there in the written recommendation. But again, what most people are going to say is that the food pyramid is now the visual guide for those that follow it, by the way, which is like slim to none. But when you look at that, you would think, if I was to put this in front of someone that had no clue, anything like that, and say, which food is least important? They would say whole grains. They would say whole grains. And then I would say, what if I told you the written recommendation is that is the highest volume of servings? They would say, well, that's what idiot put this together. That's what they would say. Okay. All respect to the health secretary. But again, maybe have your intern Google a few things before you execute a government document. Okay. All right. So with that, let's see. That was page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Page 5, we've got limit highly processed foods, added sugars, and refined carbohydrates. I won't go too much into this. One of the interesting things that I saw, just to skip a rock over this one, is, one meal should contain no more than 10 grams of added sugar. Thoughts on that, Danielle?
That is exactly what, yep. I was like, well, what about dessert?
Yeah.
What about dessert? Yeah, I'm a dessert girl. And just looking at added sugar, I mean, like, I think it was just really helpful what the American Heart Association has with the teaspoons of added sugar. Mm-hmm. I think it's just easy for people to look at the label and be like, okay, well, this is how much is in my, I'm still watching my sugar, where you are just blankly saying, no more than 10 grams of added sugar in a day, in a meal. Yeah. It's just not very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not helpful.
I agree. They've got a little note down here at the bottom about added sugars that does kind of help people start to read ingredient lists, which I thought was okay. Help identify sources of added sugar, look in the ingredients and that ingredients that include the word sugar, syrup, or end in "ose," right?
Mm-hmm.
So I like that. I mean, I think that's a
Yeah.
great way to start interpreting nutrition labels. We're all about that. We're all about,
Yeah.
the available nutrition info on a given food. Great. We should
Mm-hmm.
learn how to interpret that better. But yeah, I think kind of a big miss. I think it's less practical in terms of, just 10 grams of added sugar a day. I don't think it gives great
Per
guidance on
meal.
this, or per meal. Sorry. Yep. Per meal. So that's the limit highly processed foods, added sugar, and refined carbohydrates. All right, with that, so that was page 5. Page 6 is limit alcohol beverages. This is interesting. We've kind of pulled back on the daily recommendation. Um, and so it says, consume less alcohol for better overall health. Okay. Part of me appreciates that because it's like whatever you're doing now probably needs to be less. Okay. So if you're doing 3 a day, 2 would be, quote, better. If you're doing 2 a day, 1 would be better. If you're doing 1 a day, 0 would be better. Like, we need to be honest about that. Don't get me wrong. I went out to dinner with Carissa last night. I had 2 old fashions, right? And so I had alcohol last night. But we also have a mountain of evidence that there is 0 health benefit, right? Despite all the studies back in the day that showed like, oh, people that drink wine daily have longer lifespan. Well, yeah, they're more affluent. They've got access to medical care. They eat better. They exercise. They've got lower stress. They've got higher income, blah, 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 blah. It wasn't the wine, guys. It's multifactorial. But all that to say, bit of a miss in my opinion on this one. This one's just so vague. And, when they did their big presser and released this, I forget who said it. One of the guys said, oh, it's a social lubricant. Yeah, it's ideal if you don't drink any, but it's a social lubricant. And so that's kind of being made fun of out there too, because it's sort of this wishy-washy, sort of like the added sugar thing, but they're also talking about getting back to like cane sugar Coca-Cola. You're sort of like, wait, hold on. Are we saying alcohol is not ideal? Or are we saying that it's a social lubricant and therefore good? Are we saying that Coke should have sugar in it again? Or are we saying that we should be limiting sugar? It's a little bit of double speak, but I'm curious your thoughts on the alcohol side.
Yeah, I guess I did hear that part about the social lubricant part, but I like just looking at the guidelines. At least it says just less.
Yeah,
Less is best.
And that can be fairly practical. So with that, it goes into a couple other sections. And so I want to throw it over to you, Danielle, and have you kind of walk through changes or lack thereof with some of the remaining sections in pages 7, 8, 9, and 10.
All right. So I'm just scrolling down to that. So honestly, there wasn't 7 through 10 is really about special populations and considerations. I think this is really helpful for parents, because it's talking about infancy and early childhood first. And why I think it's helpful is it's very bulleted. I mean, like we already mentioned, the last one was 164 pages, and to read it top to bottom would not happen if you had an infant. So I think this is really helpful. Just to give you the basics, the most important things are very highlighted, and it talks about including nutrient dense foods in infancy and early childhood. Like, that is a win.
Huge. Right? Huge.
Once you start giving those complementary foods at 6 months, like, they need to be nutrient dense foods. There's like little tummies, and they need to be packed with the nutrients that they need. There's no room for added sugar or anything else. So, so it's really all the same recommendations. I do like how it's highlighted, even though the last document did say, to increase or introduce the high allergen foods early. It, again, it's buried in all the pages. So it's great that this really stands out to do those high allergen foods early, as that decreases your risk for food allergies. And then, excuse me, page 8 is going into like the readiness. So it's really good to talk about your child's readiness to eat or begin eating solids. So it's good that they included that. Middle childhood and adolescence. Honestly, there's not a lot of differences, and I think that's good. There's, again, focusing on the whole nutrient dense foods is repeated again. So we love that. It's just kind of giving some considerations for, like specific life stages, like adolescence is the rapid growth period. Okay, so we know that. I guess it's showing that full fat dairy products are important for children. It says that for the 5 to 10. Honestly, that's really in the previous recommendations, the full fat dairy stopped at age 2.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with that because of our heart disease in America. So I, would not like that information in there.
And just in the previous page too, it does have full fat yogurt and cheeses, and that's in infancy and early childhood, and that's birth to 4 years, right? So that says up to 4, and then it just carries it on into the middle, and so there seems to be kind of no throttle on that at all. But interesting to note that you would recommend that to basically 2.
Yeah. So yeah, it's supposed to be whole milk till 2.
Yeah.
It says for 5 to 10, no amount of added sugar is recommended. I love that because I think sometimes as parents, we think our kids are running around and playing. They're not doing it as much as they should most often. And they think that that's okay to have the added sugar. And it's not. It's not good for them. If it's not good for you, it's not good for them. All right. Sorry, I felt a little passionate about that.
Nailed it.
On to page 9, young adult, pregnant women, lactating women. Again, all this is good information. I didn't see any huge differences from the last one. Again, because it's bolded and easy to read. I like how the pregnant women section highlighted iodine as a top priority because a lot of people didn't know about that. As an increased need during pregnancy. There's nothing else. I like how the older adults is at the very bottom, and it talks about older adults need fewer calories but still require equal or even greater amount of key nutrients. I love that.
Amazing.
I do. I understand, right? When I'm 85 or 90, I might just want to have cookie for breakfast. Totally. I get it, but just, it's recognizing that just, there's still some nutrition needs and goals for older adults. And then page 10, it just talks about chronic disease and how we can slow or prevent the onset with food. So that's great. It's not, specifically said that, but that's what I gleaned, that you're trying to say that food is powerful. So that's great. And then the vegetarians and vegan section, I like the part where it says significantly limit highly processed vegan and vegetarian foods. I think a lot of the times it might be perceived that having a vegetarian or vegan food plan or dietary habit is healthier. But unfortunately, if not done properly, it's not. And there are a lot of highly processed vegan and vegetarian food items. And if you choose this type of eating pattern, we really want to make sure you're still choosing the whole foods as well. And then it just highlights for that particular dietary pattern the need for those vitamins and minerals that you're missing when you don't have meat. So that is the end.
And you know what? I didn't plan on doing this, but I'm pulling it up real quick because it's interesting that they do. I didn't think about this, and far be it from me, but I will. I hope this isn't weird to quote defend vegetarians and vegans, because a lot of people think I'm anti-vegetarian and vegan. No more so, than, well, we'll leave that for another topic. But so what I did, it's interesting that they called that out, is that the nutrient deficiencies was only really, called out for vegetarians and vegans. Now, the counter argument might be, yeah, but if you follow the rest of it, then omnivores won't have deficiencies. Okay, but if you take a look at global estimation of dietary micronutrient inadequacies, all right, this PMID 392-18000, you see this, that the common dietary inadequacies in vegans are vitamin B12, vitamin D, EPA, DHA, calcium, iron, particularly in women, zinc, iodine. Okay. Oh, wait, sorry. That's a PMID. Sorry. That's PMID 350-10904. Okay. The common dietary inadequacies in meat eaters is polyunsaturated fatty acids, ALA, fiber, folate, vitamin E, magnesium. Again, sorry, I misquoted a different deficiency study. So PMID 350-10904. You can take a look at that. So just know that right now, omnivores that are on your, you're on your high horse. Those vegans and vegetarians, they're all their deficiencies, all sorts. They don't eat right, blah, blah, blah. You likely have, as a meat eater, you likely have some deficiencies as well. All right. So a little bit of humility. Okay. Now, again, I know the argument might be, well, that's because we haven't been eating like the dietary guidelines with RFK fixed everything. You just eat all that. We'll be fine. Okay. Well, and that kind of brings us to maybe our conclusion, right, on ramp, which is no one follows these. Okay. So one of the biggest narratives right now is that the food pyramid, the nutritional guidelines from the government, by the way, you should not be waiting around for the government to tell you how to eat. Okay. But that the guidelines have created the problems that we see. Okay. Here's what you need to hear. No one has been following them. That's the disconnect. It's not that my plate didn't work. It's that people didn't work my plate. Okay. It's not that the recommendations were dramatically different. Now they're so different that we're going to fix all this. We're going to fix roughly zero if people don't change. And if they had changed under my plate, they could have counteracted some of these trends. If they change under this new one, they can counteract some of these trends. If they counteracted some of how they eat under the old food pyramid, they could counteract. If they change, they could counteract that. Okay. So the problem has not nearly been that the recommendations are wrong. It's that people don't follow them. Okay. So again, back to the top. We're kind of excited that people are talking about this. Perhaps this is the first time that you've dug into conversations or had conversations with people. Chances are you weren't debating my plate. Okay. Okay. You might have been thinking that it was still the old food pyramid. We haven't had that for over about 15 years. This year, it'll be 15 years since we discontinued that. You might have just been like, that's just way in the past. But chances are you weren't talking about my plate. You weren't talking about the guidelines. Perhaps to the fact that it hasn't been accessible. 164 pages, even for nutrition professionals, we got to chomp through that thing. We have to eat that thing like, food we don't care for, because it was long and arduous, and you had to work through what does this practically mean. And you guys trusted us to do that for you, and you'd come to us and we would help synthesize that. This is, the new guidelines are very simplified. Okay. For better, for worse, they're broad. They still require professional guidance, and that's what we're here to do. All right. So I kind of want to summarize this, Danielle, if we could, of just kind of taking a look at here's a couple of differences that we've seen, right? We kind of have a specific, what I think they got right about protein. We've got a specific target now in the guidelines, 1.2 to 1.6. We love that. We're working on protein at every meal, right? I can kind of walk back through this. We love that. We love dairy, although it's a little curious to start that language of full fat dairy, given that saturated fat and the mountain of evidence behind the negative health outcomes. Fruits and veggies all day long. Love that. 3 servings of veggies, 2 servings of fruits. Incorporate healthy fats is where it gets a little interesting, right? Kind of like with the protein and the fact that it looks like animal protein should be dominant in the food pyramid. You've got healthy fats, but we haven't increased the 10% number, which we don't think you should. But we're saying increase saturated fat intake, but don't increase the threshold of how many calories as part of your total calorie intake. So that's a little weird. We've got focus on whole grains. Awesome. I don't know if I will ever see anyone who thinks the new food pyramid is so amazing going around saying, guys, did you know that the greatest amount of servings you should have in a day is whole grains? I think the way it's going to be interpreted, the way that your friends are going to talk about this, is that whole grains are at the very bottom, sort of like a peasant food that you eat at the very end if you just need a little extra calories, rather than a foundational piece, which it is per their own recommendations. But yeah, anytime we're talking about nutrient dense whole foods, limiting highly processed added sugars, that's all good. And that's not different. That's not different from my plate. So when people are saying this is a radical to the top of the line, these guidelines mark the most significant reset of federal nutrition policy in our nation's history. I buy that like 5% true. It's just not if you actually know what the last version was, And so there's some right, there's some wrong, there's some good, there's some bad. there's some quirks, there's some, kind of inconsistencies, I would say. And I've just begun to taking a look at the Scientific Foundations. There's another document. There's a third supporting document that's called the Scientific Foundation for the Dietary Guidelines for Americans. It's a 90-page supporting document with citations. I think it's going to be, I've just done a cursory look through it. I think it's going to be predominantly, a document of integrity, but I've already started to see a couple inconsistencies, and other people have pointed this out too. They're on the alcohol study. They're actually pointing to a study of vegans, and I think it's like B12. So like, there's just like some clerical errors, or like someone didn't like check the execution of this document. It does look a little sloppy in some of those things. However, I don't want to end on a bad note. It's highly accessible. The 10 pages that we just went through are highly accessible. And apart from a few of the disconnects from the visual to the written side that we've pointed out, I still think it's predominantly helpful. However, the question is whether or not someone's going to actually execute it in their life, right? Mm-hmm. So Danielle, do we have hopes for this being practical moving forward, that this will, are we going to, in the next 4 years, are we going to see a massive change in health outcomes? You and I hope it. I'm not trying to be sarcastic or snarky. Like, we hope for it. We work for it every day with people. Mm-hmm. But do we think this is going to be the bullet that finally fixes it because it's the major reset that America's been waiting for?
Well, I mean, I guess if they have the motivation to use the tool, like, if maybe one tool is not the tool that worked for them, but like you said, if we didn't use the tools in the past, that's not, they weren't necessarily wrong. I think you're wrapping up, but I did want to just say, I know we kind of highlighted that you can really easily read 10 pages, but I did want to say that the 164 pages, even though it's super long, there was a lot of graphics and really nice, like one example, it talks about just different swaps, nutrient dense swaps. Like, here's a taco bowl. Like, how can you make it more nutrient dense? I thought that was some great information. They had this 8515 document, which is talking about how, not 100% of your foods need to be nutrient dense. We talk about this all the time, the functions of food, of balancing pleasure and purpose. So we might say 90-10 more often, but just a guide of your calories, that they don't have to be 100% nutrient dense. I loved that part.
True.
In the old one, it talks about your personal preferences and your cultural traditions and budget considerations. Again, that's really important. I know we lose that with just cutting down on the length of it. It goes through top sources. So if you're struggling to identify what your top sources of added sugar or sodium or saturated fat are, it gives you some really great examples in that old document. So I could go on and on. I think I wish if I my two near and dear things to my heart is kids. And so I wish there was information. In the old document, they had responsive feeding. That's basically just talking about how to listen to your baby when they can't talk, of fullness and satiety cues. So I wish that was included. And then I also wish the old one did not include this, but I wish this new one would have just talked about like Ellen Satter's division of responsibility, because that I feel like is where it begins, in being able to incorporate these nutrient dense foods at home with your kids. If we don't have the Ellen Satter division of responsibility, best of luck. It's really, I feel like, the key to be able to model. You can model the nutrient dense foods, but if you're letting your kids pick their meals, that's not going to happen. They're not going to be choosing nutrient dense foods. So those are, I think, having more of that mindful eating in the new guidelines, maybe in 5 years.
And here's the good news too. Here's the good news. If you're listening to this, you can go to dietaryguidelines.gov. Okay. And that's going to give you the new document. So you go to Dietary Guidelines for Americans dietaryguidelines.gov. That will take you to the page that has a link to the new ones. And if you just scroll down a little bit, it's got the previous editions. So it's not like those are gone. You can't look them up. They scrubbed them from the archives. You can still take a look. So I would say start with the new one. It's 10 pages. And if that scratches an itch or gets you encouraged, to Danielle's point, take a look at the 2020 version. take a look at that. It is beautiful. I was looking back through it today. I'm like, oh my gosh, it really, I'm not trying to knock it, but I'm like, it does kind of pale in comparison. Like, I mean, the new one is just sort of like an 8th grade project compared to the old one, for better or for worse. And so it's beautifully done.
It is.
It's just
There's
long. It's just
pretty
long.
pictures too.
It is. It really is. So you can go, again, you can go to dietaryguidelines.gov, just scroll down a little bit, and also get the previous editions. And the final good news is that, look, again, this is broad guidance. Whether we're talking about a 10-page document that's broad and a little vague, maybe some disconnects, we're talking about 164 pages that have lots of details and nuance, and you're a busy professional, you're a parent, all this sort of stuff, chances are you still could use, some professional guidance. And so that's the good news, is that that's what we love to do. That's what we love doing with our clients, is helping individualize and making this stuff actionable, making it practical. As we say, I think on our website, we help, with evidence-based, practical evidence-based nutrition coaching that works in real life. Okay. And so it's great to have documentation. It's great to have recommendations, but what does it actually look like to eat the right amount for you? What does it actually look like to hit your protein on a daily basis in a way that might be different than Mark chooses to get his protein, that Danielle chooses to get her protein? Because the way that Danielle and I get our protein is very different. The way that you get your protein is different. The way that we incorporate, healthy fats and carbohydrates and whole grains and all that sort of stuff is different. So at the end of the day, that's what we do. We would love to help if possible. And so if that is of interest to you, just shoot us a note. Just shoot us an inquiry. You don't have to commit to anything. You can just head over to imagonutrition.com. That's IMAGO nutrition.com. You can have a look through the website. You can hit our contact form. It doesn't sign you up for anything. You can just shoot us a note. You have questions about this. You have questions about what it means for you. We'd love to be that guide for you. So if this, look at that. We did it in 57 minutes, Danielle.
We did it. Less than an hour.
Well done. I think that was fun. We were both excited. I hope this was super helpful. If so, would love for you to subscribe to the podcast, drop us a review, let us know how we're doing. Feel free to share it with your friends. We'd love to help clarify as much nutrition misconceptions as we can for free. That's why we do the podcast. You can follow us on social media at Imago Nutrition. That's IMAGO Nutrition. And as always, we'd like to thank the band Happy Pill for our theme song, Thinkin Bout Food. See you next time.